the immediacy of it really started to take off when George Bush took over the Oval Office, and then it accelerated from there when Obama, a Democrat, was in office, and it's accelerated with Trump in office.
Hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you for Arcadia Economics, and it is time once again for Denver Dave Kranzler's weekly silver and gold market update. Dave, it's great to have you here as always this week. And how are you doing, my friend?
Great to be back. I didn't know gold got any billing in our weekly podcast.
I mean, that makes sense. It's only been like, I don't know, a year that we've been calling it Denver Dave Silver and Gold Market Update. So I'm sure after a couple of reps, it will sink in, which makes sense. And speaking of which, before we kick in there, handsome, would like to repeat some news from one of our sponsors, Bluestone Resources, who's bringing this episode to everyone today. Dave, they had some drill results on the south zone of the Serra Blanca Gold Project, where they had bonanza grades recently intersected of 674.8 grams per ton of gold, 2,863 grams per ton silver, over 1.1 meters, and link to Bluestone to find out more about what they're doing. That's Jack Lundeen, is in the description field. Dave, show folks where that would be, down right there below. And we'll link to an interview with Jack at the end of today's episode. And again, people looking for gold exposure, one to consider. And Dave, you look like you've got a comment already. I like you're excited today.
I mean, I guess I'm excited. No, I was just going to say those look like pretty interesting drill results. I have to take a look at all of the assays, not just the headline assay, but yeah, looks like it could be an interesting project.
Well, yeah, I would love to hear what you think, Dave. I get emails from your fan club. They email me with their like, I love Dave. Can you send them a coin or or a lot of people who write in, they've got the journal. It's Dave Kranzler's Mining Stock Journal. And yeah, maybe you could give out silver with each copy of your journal, Dave. That would be nice.
I don't think so.
Yeah, not quite your thing.
I'll give out what are they? Oh, Federal Reserve notes. I'll give out $1 denomination FRNs.
Well, you could send out, when we did the Federal Reserve tour of Denver, by the way, lame that you didn't show up for that one. It was so much fun. But they gave us bags of shredded bills. So you can send out shredded fiat junk, which is, I don't know, maybe worth only a little bit less than the ones that are still intact. Dave, interesting week in gold and silver.
But first of all, I took the tour of the Federal Reserve building, Reserve facility in Denver when I was like in junior high. So, and I actually lived probably a 5-minute walk from there.
Was that? Actually, that was right during the Great Depression. When you were when you must have been going back in the 1930s, right?
Something like that.
Yeah. Well, Dave, you can mix in your history of all of your decades of experience as we dig into gold and silver this week. Here, silver, it sure is fascinating the way this trades because, I mean, here you see just kind of trading sideways for 3 days in a row. Of course, after this one, earlier in the week, I believe it was on Monday. Similar pattern with gold. Again, we still have, that's from 2011, but as you see, it's a familiar looking chart. And also the election, I don't know whether to say it's decided or not. I had a headline the other day where I said gold and silver get hammered as Biden is declared president. I didn't say he was the president. As far as I've heard, I know CNBC or NBC and Associated Press say he's president. People get upset no matter what you say. Where does this leave gold and silver? It seems like a bit of a jumbled mess.
Honestly, it doesn't matter who's sitting in the Oval Office or which political party is sitting in the Oval Office. What's going on in the gold and silver markets, and the reason to try and convert as much of your fiat currency into physical gold and silver as you can, that you safe keep yourself. It's irrelevant who's president. So honestly, I don't really care. The fundamentals driving gold and silver, and that will drive them much higher than where they are right now. Both parties have contributed to that situation. It's, accelerating federal spending deficits, bankrupt state and local governments, massive acceleration in the money supply since 2008, and accelerating issuance of government treasury debt to fund the deficits. So those are your main variables that are pushing gold and silver higher. And going back, really going back to 1971, but the immediacy of it really started to take off when George Bush took over the Oval Office, and then it accelerated from there when Obama, a Democrat, was in office, and it's accelerated with Trump in office. And yeah, sure, the expectation is that Biden will be even more reckless with fiscal policy than Trump was, but I don't know how you can be any more reckless than any of the presidents over the last 30, 40 years have been with fiscal policy. So, even Bill Clinton, who is erroneously attributed with having balanced the budget, which is a bunch of nonsense. That was an accounting sleight of hand by Robert Rubin when he was Treasury Secretary. Technically, the budget was never balanced. They just moved a lot of the spending off balance sheet or off budget. So, again, just to emphasize, it doesn't really matter who's president in terms of what's going to happen with gold and silver.
That makes a lot of sense. And I largely agree, although I think I had a new idea this morning. Maybe you can see what you think about this one, where someone was asking me the same thing. Wouldn't it matter if Biden becomes president? Because I guess he had looked at a chart saying in Democratic regimes, gold and silver moves faster. And I think you and I are in agreement that gold and silver are largely determined by what happens on the COMEX, right?
I don't know where that person makes that assumption. Gold went from $35 to $200 under Nixon. That's a Republican government, right?
Well, I hear you. We'll leave that aside if we can, just for the moment. But certainly I actually wrote the book on it, that I think that the price of silver is being determined by the paper on the COMEX. Yet, what's the difference between the last 8 years and then these last year and a half or two when the price has finally risen? There's some degree to which, the underlying demand does affect it. It's not linear, but so I guess I was thinking, to the degree that if Biden becomes the president, however you want to phrase it, when I think about, I'm not trying to rile, Dave, you can antagonize whichever side you want if you want. I'm not trying to do that, but I would say that the average person that has gone through the process of starting a business, so your business owners, I think when they hear that some of the things that Biden is planning to do, that makes them very fearful, to the degree that I think you could see capital flight from the country if some of the ideas that are talked about are implemented. So could that hasten or more rapidly affect gold and silver? Any thoughts on any of that?
Well, first of all, the notion that the price of silver or gold is set on the COMEX, it is over short periods of time. But over the last 20 years, gold has been the best performing asset, bar none. Silver's been the third best performing asset over the last 20 years. So, the people trying to control the price, it's really more of like a managed retreat, as opposed to absolute control. If they could lock down the price of gold and silver, they would have done that starting in 2000 and early 2001 when gold was down at 250 and silver was, boy, I think silver ticked below $3 or below $4 back then. I know it was definitely down to $4 in the early when this bull market in the precious metals just got started. So yeah, the manipulation exacerbates the sell-offs. We saw that on Monday. And certainly if the CFTC held rigid to the standard of the amount of COMEX paper or CME paper, of COMEX paper that's allowed to be outstanding relative to the identifiable amount of underlying deliverable commodity. So for instance, cattle futures, I guarantee you're not going to see cattle futures with an open interest more than double a year's supply of cattle. So, if the CFTC issued and enforced a decree that said, the amount of gold and silver futures contracts can't have a notional value in excess of, say, 110 or 120% of the amount of underlying identifiable physical that's available for delivery, price of gold and silver would be substantially higher than it is right now. There's no question about that. But the manipulation's there. We got to live with it. At some point, it'll fail. But you can't let it detract from the fact that gold's been the best performing asset over the last 20 years. And that includes Bitcoin.
Well, there you go. And I like you got that little shot against the cryptos in there very subtly.
It's not a shot against the cryptos. I have my opinion on cryptos, but in terms of whether or not you should own them, I'm agnostic. I don't own any. I'm just going to wait until the central banks roll out their crypto that they make everyone use. So
I'm sure you'll be lining up to convert into that real rapidly.
In terms of whether or not, we'll see more capital flight under a Biden regime, who knows? Everyone's making all these assumptions about what he's going to be able to do and not do. You're still going to have a gridlocked Congress. In fact, I think the Republicans picked up some seats in the House, and there's a movement to get rid of Pelosi as Speaker of the House. So, I think it's, whoever ends up being awarded the presidency, I think it's not likely that it'll be awarded to Trump, but you never know. It's going to be tough sledding for either one, and especially the damage done from the lockdown is a lot of it's going to be permanent, and that's going to just further stimulate the variables that are going to make the argument for why gold and silver are going to go a lot higher over the next 2 or 3 years or 4 years, whatever.
Yeah. Well, speaking of which, I did listen to a podcast today. I cannot verify the accuracy. They cited that its peak, COVID was the 49th most deadly factor in China. So if you rank like car accidents, cancer, smoking, again,
I don't find that hard to believe at all.
We'll leave that aside to play by the YouTube rules. There's some sensitive topics out there, but what I would love to know back on gold and silver, Dave, hearing a lot about the upcoming December deliveries on the COMEX. Curious if you have any thoughts, expectations, what people might expect. Could that be an event?
It's every year it seems like, the December deliveries are billed as a potential backbreaking event for the COMEX, and every year that doesn't happen. So, again, I've just concluded that the ability to determine what's really going on beneath the surface at the COMEX is impossible unless you're a member, a clearing member of the COMEX or one of the COMEX banks that operates the vaults there. because all the data that we get that's publicly available from the COMEX is sourced and produced by the banks, right? So, you know, I've said for a long time, if the banks are honestly reporting the data that they present to the public, even the weekly commitment of traders report, that comes from banks. Those banks have these reports they send to the CFTC, and it produces the commitment of traders report. If the banks are honestly and ethically presenting the information on the COMEX that they're presenting, it would be the only segment of their business. These big sprawling banks with global presence and multiple business segments, and they all report dishonestly. There's no way the COMEX reporting is honest. I'm sorry. So for me, especially when you come to big delivery months like December, it's just kind of a wait and see. I'm not going to have any preconceived judgments about what I think will or will not happen. What we do know is that really since, I guess, March or April, there's been, in relative to history, there's been an extraordinary amount of deliveries of gold on the COMEX. But again, how much of that gold actually is removed from the COMEX for private safekeeping, I don't know. I think a lot of it actually stays in the COMEX vaults. And so who knows if the gold's really there or not, and the banks and the vault operators, the way they structure their fees, they incentivize entities who are taking delivery to actually keep their metal in the COMEX for safekeeping. Well, let's call it safekeeping. So, and it's not like seamless and easy to actually remove gold and silver from the COMEX. It's, there's fees that you have to pay, and there's hoops you have to jump through. So, again, I don't think we're going to see the COMEX fall until there's a big movement of people who are, entitled to remove gold and silver from the vaults. And when that happens, then I think you'll see all hell break loose.
Well, will be interesting to see. I want to be careful how I phrase this. I anecdotally hear people talk about trying to do something. We'll leave it at that. So not any, like the Hunt brothers didn't call me, but I hear from some of the conversations I have, whether it's certain groups testing certain things, I don't know. We'll see when it matters. And again, I'm not trying to lead anybody astray there, just sharing that. Dave, you mentioned how if the banks were reporting accurate information would have been the first time they're doing that. Reminds me, I made a video the other day about whether investors can sue JP Morgan. So far, the news I'm getting back is encouraging. And I wanted to run this by you because this is from this September. JP Morgan settles lawsuit that accused firm of spoofing precious metals trades. So perhaps the key takeaway is that they settled a case. So something related to spoofing, basically they settled it. I believe I'm not sure the terms of the settlement, if that's public, but I'm assuming there's a payment there, and that would seem to be a good legal precedent.
120 million, it's right there.
No, that's what the JP Morgan has to pay the CFTC. We'll see. But here there was a case by Daniel Shack, who was a hedge fund manager. But check this out. 3 plaintiffs had accused JP Morgan of manipulating the silver futures between 2010 and 2011. So that's actually why I had this thing pulled up. I was talking with Andrew McGuire about this yesterday. Forget about what you or I think or what seems logical. Does a court of law that just fined JP Morgan, do they consider that a spoof? Can I mark what my positions were here, what they went down to there? It's a little bit, we have some legal digging to do, but I don't know exactly what argument they made, but some argument they made related to spoofing. JP Morgan settled. There was also, I forget who I was listening to this morning, was mentioning that basically JP Morgan will never want to go to a court of law. So they might be, this guy wasn't surprised they settled. But here, so A, you have that period. So I wonder what the CFTC, maybe, you know, they had their press release. If they gave us some insight on that, would be helpful. But here, this is the part that I wanted to get to. The bank for years denied the allegations, and in 2016 succeeded in getting the plaintiff's claims dismissed. So they induced illegal action by lying. And then here, they appealed the decision, got it reopened. So really, I mean, there's certainly precedent here that anything JP Morgan says is fair game to question. And yeah, certainly, I mean, I don't know what is the formula, how close to reality what they put on that COT report is, but I long-winded, I agree with your point. So thank you for saying it.
Oh, thank you.
Some people complain about my long questions, or I don't know. I try and make the show. I think what's fun about it is when it is like two friends talking, which really, you know, I'm just the young buck here with like the old, you're like the old seasoned wizard. I mean, all those decades of experience, man, you got to know something. Although,
what about that guy behind you? Is that one of your buddies?
I'm sending. I wanted to be Ben Bernanke for Halloween this year because I figured I have the brown eyes. I could get the beard. I just needed the bald part. Well, I've been moving all over the country over the last couple of months, so maybe next year we are going to get him in silver form. Dave, maybe we can make the world's greatest special. I'm listening to some sales material this week, so be careful. But imagine if you could get a combo variety pack of a silver chopper Ben paperweight on your desk. Nibbles is designing the 4-ounce silver dog bone for your dog. And then for the viewer at home, you get the Mining Stock Journal. You can also get the Mining Stock Daily. And then you'll be running circles around the rest of the Wall Street for the next, I don't know, Dave, given the rate these central banks are going, are we going to see a gold and silver rally for decades? I mean, is that unreasonable to say?
I know. I think there'll be a reset well within the next 10 years.
Okay.
So certainly not a decade, and it certainly isn't pluralized.
Well, I mean, what isn't as long as government around, like as long as they're there, it's like silver is just, to me, going to get better. But that's why I'll read my Mining Stock Journal. And Dave, I know all of the answers are contained within. You get 2 of these babies a month for $20 a month, which I actually.
The next issue's out this afternoon. I'm just putting the finishing touches on it now, and it'll be sent out right after the market closes.
We got some silver action
ideas in there, and I review Fremont Gold.
We got some silver action in this one.
Ooh, that reminds me. I'll probably add a little bit of silver color to it.
All right. Well, Dave, I'll say anyone who signs up to your journal in the next week, you send me their email address, and if they'd like, I'll send a audio copy of the Big Silver Short. So you can start off, obviously, Chapter 1, featuring Denver Dave Kranzler, who joins us on the show for these great updates each week. So, Dave, thank you, as always, for being here, and I'll be looking forward to next week, my friend.
Likewise, Chris.